A polygamy/polyamory website guide. Chapter 1. A poly-love dating website guide. Poly dating websites. Some people look for multiple spouses, but these websites aren't much different from adult/casual sex dating websites because polyamory is just a synonym for a casual sex lifestyle with multiple partners. Meetup.com hosts poly-love events. Polymatchmaker.com. twowives.com. polypersonals.livejournal.com. plural.marriage.dating.site.onlinedatingfreenow.com. pluralmarriagepersonals.com. 2pos4u.com/wbcsm/polyamory/polyamory_14.html. alldatingdirectories.com/alternative-lifestyles/polyamory. alternativesexdating.org/polyamory.html. freepersonalads.org/polyamorypersonalsads.htm. groups.msn.com, polyamorous. lookuponline.com/datingcouplesguide.html. pairzy-poly-personals.com. polyamorous.us. polyamory.com. polyamory.org. polyamory.tribe.net. polyamory.us. polyamoryconnection.com. polyamorysociety.org. polymatchmaker.com. polyorlando.org. swingdate101.com. worldpolyamory.association.com. online polyamory groups. groups.google.com/group/alt.polyamory/topics. groups.yahoo.com/group/bd-smpoly. groups.yahoo.com/group/cpn polymono, polyamorous people with monogamous partners. groups.yahoo.com/group/doms_ub_polyamory, dominants and submissives. groups.yahoo.com/group/ds_triads, d/s triads. groups.yahoo.com/group/inw poly, inland northwest poly, Idaho, Montana, Washington. groups.yahoo.com/group/lovingmore_love list. groups.yahoo.com/group/loving-amory polyactive, polyactivism. groups.yahoo.com/group/New York C-GLBT-poly, NYC-GLBT poly, New York City gay, lesbian, bi and transgendered polyamory. groups.yahoo.com/group/New York C-poly, NYC poly. groups.yahoo.com/group/poly-alt-religion-thinkers, poly in alternative religion. groups.yahoo.com/group/poly-amory. groups.yahoo.com/group/polyamory relationships. groups.yahoo.com/group/polyfamilies. groups.yahoo.com/group/polyfidelity2. groups.yahoo.com/group/polygreens, poly people in the Green Party. groups.yahoo.com/group/polyleaders, poly leaders network, legal rights and protections for polyamorous relationships. groups.yahoo.com/group/polymoderators, people who are in charge of poly groups. groups.yahoo.com/group/polymono, monogamous people with polyamorous partners. groups.yahoo.com/group/polymono, monogamous people with polyamorous partners. groups.yahoo.com/group/polyout. groups.yahoo.com/group/polyresearchers, study of polyamory. groups.yahoo.com/group/poly-thinkers. groups.yahoo.com/group/Satania_rega, Satania regna, responsible non-monogamous relationships and polyactivism. groups.yahoo.com/group/Satania-regna, polyactivism. groups.yahoo.com/group/spiritual polyamory. groups.yahoo.com/group/women_of_polyamory. groups.yahoo.com/search, type in polyamory. Chapter 2. Poly love websites from dmoz-odp.org/society/relationship/alternative_lifestyles. Poly love websites. Angelfire.com/WA3/SSO, poly-minded couple seeks sister wife, Rains, and Cambriel site dedicated to finding a woman to complete our family. Learn all about us, our thoughts, hobbies and desires. Get useful poly resources. Angelfire.com/goth/TMHIDH, Lair of the Lunabun, a personal website with music links and a short bio about a polyamorous bisexual woman. Soon to include a diary of sorts of what it is like being a part of a poly relationship. Angelfire.com/zine2/poly/index.html, Solace, a personal poly page, free affection therapy for the polyamorous and traumatized, some pictures, some songs and other personal stuff. AtlantaPolyWeekend.com, Atlanta Poly Weekend, annual poly conference in Atlanta, Georgia, USA. Includes list of presenters and general information. Buttery.org/MarkPoly, Mark's home on the web, some thoughts, including thoughts about poly. Cat-and-dragon.com/Steph, Steph, personal information, writings, alt.support.bigfolks and soc support.fat acceptance FAQs. FAQs.org/FAQs/polyamory, ALT polyamory FAQ, addresses such topics as types of poly, difference between poly and cheating, handling jealousy, bisexuality, longevity of poly relationships, children, and newsgroup etiquette. Includes supplemental information about culture and meeting stories. Groups.yahoo.com/group/polyamory2, Yahoo Groups, Polyamory, a place for the polyamorous community to meet and discuss poly issues. Groups.yahoo.com/group/gunpoly, Yahoo Groups, Kansas Polyamory, an email list for those interested in discussing polyamory in and around Kansas. Groups.yahoo.com/group/polyfamilies, Yahoo Groups, Polyfamilies, a group for polyfamilies consisting of 3 or more adults and any combination of children. It is meant to discuss real issues that poly households face. Insomnia.livejournal.com, Insomnia, the journal of Mark Kraft, a journal about sexuality, polyamory, technology, world affairs, and the exploits of this guy who is wrapped up in the maelstrom. libchrist.com/poly/contents.html, liberated Christians, polyamory, promotes non-monogamy, polyamory or swinging as a legitimate choice for Christians and others. Special focus on the Christian aspect and whether the Bible and non-monogamy are compatible. livethedream.org, Live the Dream, an education and support group for people in group marriages. lovemore.com, Loving More, a non-profit charitable organization, online community, and magazine dedicated to supporting and educating. lovemore.com/conferences/polyliving, Polyliving Polyamory Conference, 2 poly conferences a year, put on by Loving More. Includes dates, hotel information, pricing and registration information. lovewithoutlimits.com, Sacred Space Institute, SSI's intention is to create a context in which the arts of whole systems healing, sacred sexuality, polyamory, community development and new paradigm relating can be taught, developed, applied, given professional legitimacy and disseminated internationally. Polyamory.livejournal.com, a polyamory community, a live journal community, for those who are interested in polyamory, to discuss the philosophy and practice of the polyamorous love style. Polyamory.org, alt.polyamory, extensive set of resources about polyamory, containing FAQs, essays, spots for personal ads, groups, and art. Polyamorysociety.org, the Polyamory Society, a non-profit organization which promotes and supports the interest of individuals of multi-partnered relationships and families. Polymatchmaker.com, Polymatchmaker, an online personal site for poly people. Requires registration, free. Punkercellut.com/article/freelovesfreeexpression.html, Free Love is Free Expression. The title essay argues that polyamory is about freedom of the body, based on the grounds that sex is a cause for celebration, not for shame. Sensualforyou.com, Sensual for You, all about Michelle and her view of polyamory. Sexuality.org/l/polyamorer, Society for Human Sexuality, Polyamory Archive. The Society is a social and educational organization whose purpose is to promote understanding and appreciation for the many forms of adult intimate relationships and consensual sexual expression. Sites.google.com/site/IAPC2013 Homepage, International Academic Polyamory Conference 2013, an academic conference about monogamy and non-monogamy. Includes registration information, schedule, and information about an ongoing mailing list. Spice.comicgenesis.com, Spice. Polyamory for the Practical, a web comic about a group marriage. Spiritualpolyamory.com, Spiritual Polyamory by Mystic Life, the publisher says, a powerful, groundbreaking work, certain to intrigue, challenge and stimulate members of both the polycurious and polyamorous communities. Polyandry websites. Polyandry is women who have more than one husband. en.wikipedia.org/wiki/polyandry. www.personal.umich.edu/tilde/phil/antharo/polyandry.html, Polyandry in primates, cooperative polyandry among primates. Polygamy chats and forums. Groups.yahoo.com/group/biblical polygamy, Yahoo. Groups, Biblical Polygamy, moderated mailing list with restricted membership and no archives. Groups.yahoo.com/group/remnants, Yahoo. Groups, Remnant Sounds, an online fellowship of people who believe in and teach patriarchy and polygyny as set forth in the scriptures. Groups.yahoo.com/group/polygamy, Polygamy, Yahoo group for people interested in the practice of multiple soulmates and spiritual and intentional community living. marriagepartner.com/talk/messages/7/25.html Saturday, June 10/2000001554 Polygamy, many to one or one to many, collection of marriage partner talk threads. Polygamy websites. Anti-polygamy.org, anti-polygamy.org, refuting arguments commonly used against polygamy. Showing the unjustness of stereotyping polygamists as being in cults, abusive and other. Beliefnet.com/frame/ZT.ASP?story/story_66/story_6652_1.html $board ID=11173, Polygamy at Beliefnet, articles and opinions on polygamy. Registered users can share their personal thoughts about the issue. Constitution.org/cm/soul_16.htm number sign 004, Montesquieu, The Spirit of Laws, article explaining that the law of polygamy is an affair that depends on calculation. Context.org/iclib/ic10/Anna Polygamy, Another Love Style, intellectual article by Deborah Ann Apol about polygamy and monogamy. Crosswalk.com/blog/moeller/1223746, The Federal Marriage Amendment, Now is the Time for Action. Southern Baptist editorial supports amending the U.S. Constitution to define marriage as the union of a man and a woman. davidfriedman.com/academic/price_theory/pthy_chapter_21/pthy_chap_21.html, The Economics of Love and Marriage, Professor David Friedman's essay exploring economic issues affecting polygamy. econ.ucsb.edu/tedb/evolution/polygy New York 3.pdf, on the economics of polygyny, unpublished paper from Ted Bergstrom exploring the prevalence and viability of polygamy in various societies. en.wikipedia.org/wiki/polygamy, Types of polygamy, polygamy worldwide, patterns of occurrence, polygamy and religion, legal situation and the case of Mormonism. Hartford-hwp.com/archive/34/015.html, African woman leads crusade against polygamy, reproduced from the New York Times. Tells of an effort to end this traditional rural practice in Ivory Coast, where the economics of hardscrabble farming have long encouraged men to take more than one wife. Hartford-hwp.com/archive/30/158.html, query on reasons for polygamy, a student's query regarding the differing interpretations for the cultural reasons for polygyny. news.bbc.co.uk/1/hi/world/africa/1493309.stm, Sudan pushes polygamy, BBC, President Bashir urges Sudanese men to take more than one wife to increase the population and promote the country's development. news.bbc.co.uk/1/hi/world/europe/400351.stm, Russia says no to polygamy, BBC News, a decree by the leader of a small Muslim region in Russia allowing men to have up to 4 wives has been dismissed as unconstitutional by the Justice Minister. news.bbc.co.uk/1/hi/world/africa/30883115.stm, Gambian freeze on polygamy, BBC News, President Jammeh provokes ire among Muslim traditionalists with a 3-year ban on polygamous marriages. nizcorg.org/hweb/org/canada/ethnocultural-group/ecg-003-00.html, cultural practices in conflict with Canadian law, recognizing existing polygamous marriages of immigrants and providing spouses with the benefits and entitlements normally available to spouses defined by Canadian law is an outstanding issue. Pro-polygamy.com, pro-polygamy.com, provides the media and others with op-eds, press releases and articles from the pro-polygamy view. Gives email alerts and offers access to a polygamy advocate to interview. ProjectRestore.com/trumpet/TPT2003_08.htm, court battle over polygamy coming, the Trumpet Herald, in June, the U.S. Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision decriminalized sodomy. Religious broadcaster Pat Robertson is asking his nationwide audience to pray that God will remove 3 judges from the United States highest court so conservatives can replace them. ThePerspective.org/polygynewyork.html, polygyny is already a practice, article about polygamy in Africa, before and after the arrival of the colonizers and Christianity. umanitoba.ca/faculty/art/anthropology/tutor/kinmenu.html, kinship and social organization, features articles and outlines of marriage customs among different societies, which also include information about polygyny. wcc-code.org/wcc/assembly/ejubilee/7-peace5.htm, polygamy issue resolved, announcement that the question of polygamy and clergy in the Celestial Church of Christ was resolved and the denomination would be recommended for full World Council of Churches membership. Anti-polygamy websites. anti-polygamy.org. angelfire.com/journal/oneflesh, site comparing polygamy with homosexuality and prostitution, focusing on polygamy. apologeticsindex.org/p05.html, analyses of attitudes toward polygamy and plural marriage in Christianity and other major religious traditions. christianthinktank.com/polygame.html, polygamy in the NT period, claiming that monogamy is important to God's will and that entering into polygamy is committing adultery. giveshair.org/family/polygamy.html, the plain truth about Old Testament polygamy, Herbert W. Armstrong asserts that God did not sanction polygamy in Old Testament times and that biblical patriarchs each had only one wife. greaterthings.com/topical/polygamy, polygamy, exaltations prerequisite or stumbling block, resources to show that polygamy is not the highest form of union between man and wife, wives. Need to consider doctrine on its own merits or lack thereof. newadvent.org/cathon/09693a.htm, Catholic Encyclopedia, History of Marriage, The Catholic Views of Marriage, with comments on polygamy. utlm.org/online-resources/polygamy.htm, Is polygamy part of God's plan for marriage? Article saying that when God instituted his plan for marriage, it was that one man should have one wife. Chapter 3. Religious polygamy websites. Christian polygamy websites. libchrist.com. biblicalpolygamy.com, Biblical polygamy, the exegesis/argumentation proofs in the Bible, the list of all the polygamists in the Bible and the examples where the Lord himself is self-described in polygamous terms in the Bible. ChristianPoly.org, Christian polygyny, aims to present biblical support for the practice of having more than one wife at the same time. ChristianPolygamy.com, Christian polygamy, articles on reasons for polygamy, the legality of polygamy and persecution of polygamists. ChristianPolygamy.info, Christian polygamy info, reports information and history of Christian polygamy, clarifying this social movement as unrelated to Mormon polygamy. Polygyny, polyandry, patriarchy, and bigamy are also defined. Polygamypoetry.tripod.com, art in Christian polygyny, poetry, songs, graphics, rhymes and links. PolyGYNewYork.DukeOfMarshall.com, the Duke's Western North Carolina polygyny site, aims to show that polygyny is not sinful, wrong, or illegal. Truthbearer.org, Truthbearer, ministry bringing Christian polygamy to the churches. Mission, organization, and tracts. Online book, James Campbell, The History and Philosophy of Marriage, 1869. Mormon polygamy websites. ozg.gov/victims_rights/polygamy.html, Safety Net Program, Arizona and Utah Attorney General Office's efforts to help the victims of domestic violence and child abuse in polygamous relationships. ChildPro.org, Child Protection Project, provides news and information on what it sees as abuse within polygamy across the United States. Also displays FLDS documents. HoldingOutHelp.org, Holding Out Help, nonprofit organization in Utah that assists those that wish to leave a polygamist community. Includes resources, history, contacts, events, and volunteer information. LDS-mormon.com/Mormon_polygamy.shtml, Mormon polygamy, find out about the history and practice of Mormon polygamy. LetUsReason.org/LDS%209.htm, Let Us Reason Ministries, Polygamy, a Revelation from God, explores apparent inconsistencies in the Mormon history and practice of polygamy. Lightplanet.com/Mormon/daily/history/plural_marriage/MCC on key_MD.htm, The Doctrine of Plural Marriage, an LDS elder discusses the biblical basis for and history of the practice in the Mormon Church and the revelation and manifesto directing that it cease. With links to primary source documents. ReligiousTolerance.org/LDS_poly.htm, Polygamy and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Origins of Polygamy, Legal Reaction, The Great Accommodation of 1890 and Polygamy Today. utlm.org/online-resources/sermons_talks_interviews/smith-boasti non-depolygamy-denial.htm, Polygamy Sermon, Joseph Smith's Boasting and Polygamy Denial Sermon. Hinduism polygamy websites. Hinduwebsite.com/Hinduism/h_polygamy.asp, Hinduism and polygamy. This page presents the attitude of Hinduism towards polygamy. Islam polygamy websites. Answering-islam.org/index/p/polygamy.html, p/polygamy, answering-islam.org on polygamy. janah.org/genderequity/equity-chap3.html, Gender Equity in Islam, includes a few informative paragraphs about polygamy in Islam. QRunsearch.com/antipoly.htm, Polygamy in the Bible, showing that the Bible allows polygamy in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. Written by a Muslim. Judaism polygamy websites. faqs.org/faq/judaism/faq/04-observance/section-53.html, SOC culture.jewish Doesn't Judaism mandate monogamy? Answers the question of whether or not polygyny is permitted within any sect of Judaism. umanitoba.ca/faculty/art/anthropology/tutor/case_studies/hebrews/marriage.html, Hebrews, marriage, article about the marriage regulations and arrangements portrayed in the Old Testament. Chapter 4. A Poly Love Website Guide. Poly Love Websites 1. Try hashtag 301.422 at the Library for Sociological Books on Polygamy. Try hashtag 306.8423 or HQ981 for psychology books on polygamy. Sexuality.org/polyamory.html. Polyamory.org. Polyamory.org/tilde-howard/poly/orgs.html, poly organizations. Lovemore.com. cs.ruu.nl/was/html/nadir/polyamory/faq.html. etherlumina.com/gnp, gender neutral pronoun. aloha.net/tilde-olesien/polyamory.html, Joan and Alex Lessons poly page. americansfortruth.com/issues/civil-unions-gay-marriage/polyamory-polygamy-non-monogamy. bahuriya.net/tilde-steph/poly.html, Steph's poly post archive. bdt.com/home/bulletin-dryer-son/rfrat2.htm, religious. bee.net/cardigan/parsi, polyamory awareness and acceptance ribbon campaign. befree.org, patriarchal Christianity, a Christian polygamist group. bi.org. biblicalpolygamy.com. blackrose.org/bolero/pp_FAQ, polyamorous group in Ann Arbor, Me. bookcase.com/library/faq/archive/polyamory/culture.html, polyamory. Caras.ws, Community Academic Consortium for Research on Alternative Sexualities. cat-and-dragon.com/steph/poly.html, Steph's Poly Post Archive. centerplace.org/library/study/dc/ldc-mar.htm, anti-polygamy article. cirrustech.com/poly/sfp.html, South Florida polyamorists. cfnc.us, Center for a New Culture, an NFNC spin-off group on the East Coast. cfnc.us, Center for a New Culture, Arlington, VA. christianpolygamy.com. chromatic-dragonfly.com/conversation/evolved.html. cis.ohio-state.edu/hypertext/faq/usenet/polyamory/top.html. clitoressa.net/poly/veal.html. clownswillleadyou.com/poly.htm. commonhouse.net/mailman/listinfo/ahavi-araba, polyamorous and Jewish. community.livejournal.com/poly_atheists, polyatheists. community.livejournal.com/polyamory. contra.org/lifestyles. csru.nl/way/html/nabng/alt.personals.poly.html. cs.ru.nl/way/html/na-dir/polyamory/faq.html. dogs444.com/e9/49/group-marriage.html. ejhs.org, the Electronic Journal of Human Sexuality. ejhs.org/volume6/polyamory.htm. en.wikipedia.org/wiki/open_relationship. en.wikipedia.org/wiki/polyamory. en.wikipedia.org/wiki/polyamory. Encyclopedia.learnedhis.info/p/po. etext.org/religious.text/polyamory. zeromag.com/fvpoly.html. Poly love websites too. familyscholars.org/?cat=16. faqs.org/faqs/polyamory/culture. faqs.org/faqs/polyamory/faq. faqs.org/faqs/polyamory/faq-supplement, making mistakes in polyamorous relationships. faqs.org/faqs/polyamory/meeting-stories. hai.org, Human Awareness Institute. islamfortoday.com, pro-polygamy article, outlines all the advantages like a sisterhood among the wives, less housework, less adultery, etc. carriesta.com, commune. laps.org/whatpoly.html. leatheranroses.com/links/polylinks.htm. libchrist.com, liberated Christians. libchrist.com/bible/compatible.html. livejournal.com/poly_atheists. loveandpolitics.org, love and politics. lovemore.com, 303-543-7540, magazine. lovemore.com/conferences.shtm. lovewithoutlimits.com. lovewithoutlimits.com/art-heal.htm, polyamory. lovingemorithanon.wordpress.com. matthewman.org/polyamory/questionnaire.html. maxpages.com/civilrightpol1. michaeltotten.com/archive/0000020.html, polyamory and the state. miscellaneousmedia.com/polyfi.html. mithrilstar.com/polyamory-faq-ravenhearts.htm. mithrilstar.org/polyamory-faq-ravenhearts.html. moonkist.org. neopagan.net/paganpolyamory.html. nfnc.org, Network for a New Culture. nonmonogamous.livejournal.com, non-monogamy blog. openingup.net. openweave.org/ncpoly/polyterms.html. polypaths.homestead.com. paloverty.com. perverselypoly.blogspot.com. polyamorous.blogspot.com. Polylove websites 3. polyamory.com. polyamory.meetup.com, polyamory meetup groups. polyamory.org. polyamory.org/tildejo, acronyms and abbreviations. polyamory.org/Howard, Howard Landman's Polyamory Index. polyamory.org/New York, New Jersey, Tri-State Poly, Teaneck, New Jersey. polyamory.org/sf/groups.html, poly resources. polyamory.org/sf/poly-folks.html. polyamory.org/sf/yusuf.html, how some poly people meet each other. polyamory.tribe.net. polyamory.us. polyamoryconnection.com. polyamoryonline.org. polyamorysociety.org. polyandproud.com. polychromatic.com, polyamory book reviews. polychromatic.com, polyfriendly professionals. polychromatic.com/pfp, polyfriendly professionals list. polychromatic.com/polyfi.html. polycoach.com. polyfamilies.com. polygamy.com. polygamyboys.com. polygamyinfo.com. polygirl.blogspot.com. polyinthemedia.blogspot.com, polyamory in the media. poly-newyorkc.com, polyamorous NYC. polyorlando.org. polysoutheast.org, Florida to Tennessee. polyspace.wordpress.com. Polites.com, poly-oriented tees, hurts and other items for sale. Poly-texas.org, Poly Texas. Polyweekly.com, podcast. Polyweekly.libzn.com, Polyamory Weekly, radio show, podcast archives. PracticalPolyamory.com. PracticalPolyamory.blogspot.com. PracticalPolyamory.com. PrincipleVoices.org, Mormon, and Polygamy. QueerTheory.com/identities/polyamory.htm. RavenRibbon.com/ZDM/polyamory/polyamory_11.html. ReligionWriter.com/category/faith-life/polyamory. Rotten.com/library/sex/polyamory. Rule6.info/penthouse.html, polyamory in Penthouse Forum. Segenbora.com/poly.html. Sensualforyou.com, for polyamorous people. Sexuality.org/l/polyamor/apfaqsup.html. swinging-tips.co.uk/article-for1-polyamory.html. thefantasypoint.com/warfuse/polyamory/polyamory_22.html, Christian polyamory. tmillennium.com/html/robert_firehawk.html, freedom-based relationships. tristatepoly.org. truthbearer.org, the polygamous religious cult you see sensationalized in the news. tscholars.com/encyclopedia/edgy, links to the articles on polygamy. touriesTE.com/page-dir_top-society-alternative-lifestyles-polyamory.html. twomoons.com/polyamory/swpc/polyintr.htm. utne.com/issues/1999_90/features/229-1.html, polysex for beginners. uupa.org, Unitarian Universalists for Polyamory Awareness. uval.com/pioneer/polygamy.html, the polygamy story. vastlove.blogspot.com. World Polyamory Association.org, the Lemurian Center, Wailuku, Hawaii. zeromag.com/fvpoly.html, Introductory Guide to Poly. yahoogroups.com. zenzibar.com/directory/links.asp?cat=lp. alt.personals.poly. alt.polyamory. Poly love websites for AtlantaPolyWeekend.com, Atlanta Poly Weekend, annual Poly Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, USA. Includes list of presenters and general information. bchomes.org/poly/tpsg.html, Toronto Poly Social Group, a social group for poly folk and their friends in Toronto. groups.yahoo.com/group/polyamory2, Yahoo Groups, Polyamory, a place for the polyamorous community to meet and discuss poly issues. libchrist.com/poly/contents.html, Liberated Christians, Polyamory, promotes non-monogamy, polyamory or swinging as a legitimate choice for Christians and others. Special focus on the Christian aspect and whether the Bible and non-monogamy are compatible. livethedream.org, Live the Dream, an education and support group for people in group marriages. lovemore.com, Loving More, a non-profit charitable organization, online community and magazine dedicated to supporting and educating. lovemore.com/conferences/polyliving, Polyliving Polyamory Conference, 2 poly conferences a year, put on by Loving More. Includes dates, hotel information, pricing and registration information. lovewithoutlimits.com, Sacred Space Institute, SSI's intention is to create a context in which the arts of whole systems healing, sacred sexuality, polyamory, community development and new paradigm relating can be taught, developed, applied, given professional legitimacy and disseminated internationally. Polyamory.livejournal.com, a polyamory community, a live journal community, for those who are interested in polyamory, to discuss the philosophy and practice of the polyamorous love style. Polyamory.org, alt.polyamory, extensive set of resources about polyamory, containing FAQs, essays, spots for personal ads, groups, and art. Polyamory.society.org, the Polyamory Society, a non-profit organization which promotes and supports the interest of individuals of multi-partnered relationships and families. PolyCentralFL.com, Florida Polycentral Discussion Socials, an Orlando-based polyamory group that has monthly dinner/discussion meetings and occasional social events. PolyMatchmaker.com, PolyMatchmaker, an online personal site for poly people. Requires registration, free. PolyTampa.com, PolyTampa, an informal polyamory support organization serving the Tampa Bay area and Central and South Florida. punkercellut.com/article/freeloveisfreeexpression.html, Free Love is Free Expression. The title essay argues that polyamory is about freedom of the body, based on the grounds that sex is a cause for celebration, not for shame. Sexuality.org/l/polyamor, Society for Human Sexuality, Polyamory Archive. The Society is a social and educational organization whose purpose is to promote understanding and appreciation for the many forms of adult intimate relationships and consensual sexual expression. Spice.comicgenesis.com, Spice. Polyamory for the Practical, a web comic about a group marriage. Spiritualpolyamory.com, Spiritual Polyamory by Mystic Life, the publisher says, a powerful, groundbreaking work, certain to intrigue, challenge and stimulate members of both the polycurious and polyamorous communities. A list of polygamy websites at blog.feedspot.com/polygamy_blogs. Megans-polyblog.blogspot.com. blog.feedspot.com/polygamy_RSS_feeds. Polygamy411.com. Polygamyunpicked.wordpress.com. pwlit.blogspot.com. Speakingofpolygamy.com. ThePolygamist'sDaughter.com. yearofpolygamy.com.